Hi, I'm Kiara Palma, and for this Evo Lounge, I'm interviewing Charlotte Chan about her experiences and her role as a young primary teacher. Hi, Charlotte. Thank you for coming. So, what made you choose teaching as a career?
Well, growing up, I always somehow found myself doing jobs related to childcare or working with kids. When I was younger, I danced, and then I ended up teaching dance for a little bit. I worked at summer camps all the time, so it just kind of naturally evolved. And then when I did have to make a decision along my undergraduate path, I eventually decided, I love working with kids, so teaching just seemed like the right fit.
And where did you take your education?
I did my undergrad in Hong Kong.
Okay.
There was no real reason, but I just wanted to change something different from Vancouver. And then that actually made it a little bit more difficult to come back into teaching in Canada because I knew I wanted to come back and I knew I wanted to teach here. But because foreign education is not as recognized and they didn't have the same courses that was required at, let's say, UBC or SFU, I had to spend a full year afterwards making up for all the prereqs that I otherwise would have had.
So, before becoming a full-time teacher, what were some challenges you had to go through first?
I think as a young person, just deciding on what I wanted to do was a big thing for me. I'm lucky that I grew up in a family that could support whatever I wanted to do. And so it really came down to me personally. And, in a society where not many of us end up doing what our undergrads are about, making that decision, coming to teaching was actually a really big one, even though it was a very natural one for me.
Were you did you do any part-time teacher work, or were you like a TOC before being a full-time teacher?
Yeah, so this year is actually my first full year contract. I'm really lucky. When I graduated from the teaching program, it was at a time where there was a teacher shortage.
Okay.
So all my friends got jobs coming straight out of graduation. So immediately after, I was TOCing for the Richmond School District, and then in January I got a 6-month contract, and then coming into this 12-month contract. But I know in previous years there would have been a lot of teachers who would not even be able to get on a TOC list, and so lots of people had to move up north, had to go across the province, or just everywhere to try to jump into a career that they were qualified for, but that just didn't have the room for them.
So how hard was it for you as a TOC to get like a job? Because I know it's like on call, so you can't really you don't know if you're going to be working on that day.
Yeah.
How hard was it for you?
I actually really loved TOCing because to me it was an opportunity to try working with all the grades. I did K through 7 in all these different schools around Richmond. Because I went to a private school, I never really experienced all the different public schools in Richmond. But yeah, it was a challenge because everything that we learned was based on developing relationships with kids, and you don't really get to do that when you're only with them for one day. It's very different. And then, just I guess the irregularity of it. I remember last year during September, there wouldn't be much work because not many teachers have days off or take the days off in September. So knowing that I could be working and I could be starting a career that I loved, but I couldn't, was a little bit stressful. And then it's also difficult because everything in teaching comes down to seniority. And so it doesn't really, it does matter if you are the right fit, but at the end of the day, if anyone with, just that half year more of experience interviewed for the same job that I did, I would immediately get bumped. And so I think that's why I ended up with the 6-month contract, even though there were a lot of spots available, and why this year I'm still working a temporary contract because, I don't quite have that seniority to get a continuing job in the district just yet.
So why did you choose to teach grades 2 to 3? Because you teach, you've taught from kindergarten to 7, I believe, right? You mentioned before. And now you're teaching grades 2 to 3. So why did you choose like the elementary?
Yeah. I love the younger age, so I always knew that I wanted to do primary. In my practicum, I did it in grade 3, and then my contract last year was grade 1 and 2. And the thing with teaching is you always have to be really flexible. You'll always get around what you want, but it's not uncommon for a teacher to be working different grades or like a kind of near where they are, but different grades every year. And so you just learn to be flexible with the curriculum. But 2-3 I love because they're so excited about everything still. They love being in school. You still get the wonder and everything. And at the same time, they're a little bit older, a little bit more aware. And you can really have real conversations and real relationships with them.
Would you teach higher level grades, like high school?
I've thought about it, and lots of teachers who are teaching higher grades always tell me, you get these really rich conversations with the older kids. But I think when you get to an older grade, you start to develop the apathy towards school. You don't really want to be there, you don't see a purpose, and the whole too cool for school thing is still very real. So I think personally it's not for me, but I know lots of teachers who have transitioned from primary to intermediate or intermediate to primary, so maybe it will be something I do down the line, but probably not in the next few years.
What's the hardest part about your job?
I think for me the hardest part is actually all the I don't know, I think it's a lot of the things that people don't really think about when it comes to teaching. I think part of my struggles right now is trying to balance the perception of being a teacher and all the actual work that goes behind it. I feel like most people don't know, aside from the 7 hours that we do teach in a day, every teacher is putting in at least 2 hours overtime. And we're not getting paid for that overtime, but we do it because we want to have an amazing curriculum for the kids. And at the same time, I think a lot of people don't realize, teaching, you don't get a textbook of this is what you have to teach in a year. A lot of it is really dependent on, you matching the kids to, the best resource that you think there is out there for them. And so we have the baseline curriculum, which covers all the academics. And then on top of that, we have to layer a bunch of different things. Like we have to layer the First People's Principles, which are a big part of our BC curriculum right now. We have to layer SOGI, which is our LGBTQ plus issues. And then we have to layer social emotional learning and environmentalism, and all of that is just things that they expect you to tie into the language arts, socials, math, science. And that for me, I think, is a little bit of a struggle. I think for me, though, the perception of teaching in society is still what bothers me the most. I think if there was more support in society, then all this layering and all the work that we do would be a little bit easier.
So what's the anticipation like when you have to do like the parent-teacher conferences?
Yeah, I think going into it as a new teacher especially, I always knew that I wanted to go into teaching for the kids. The parents were kind of a secondary thought, and so building the parent-teacher communication has been really interesting. Last year, I kind of went into my comfort zone, and I'm personally more of an introvert, so I didn't really want to reach out to the parents and really build like a really open line of communication. But I think after last year I realized, to really help the kids develop, I have to do that, even if that's out of my comfort zone. And so, trying to develop that this year is very interesting. And I think for at least a lot of teachers, that's one of the most difficult pieces, because you really care for the kid, but the parents might not agree with your methods. And so often there's a lot of parent-teacher conflict.
So earlier you mentioned that you do dance. Are you teaching kids still or at the moment right now?
I do still sub dancing. It's still a part of my life. And then this year I took on a dance training company. And so balancing that is another thing that I'm struggling with, because I almost feel like I do have two personas. The teaching persona and then my everyday actual me persona. which is super interesting, I think, especially for a young person, because you have that professional side that you don't want to break, but at the same time you have, you know, I'm still a 25-year-old. I still, you know, want to do things that a young person would do.
Well, thank you, Charlotte. That is all I have for
Thanks
today.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That is all for this Evo Lounge. I'm Kiara Palma for Evolution 1079.